We have the book of Lamentations because we do not have the promises of God. You see, God promised unbelievably amazing things for Zion, but after her sin and her just judgment, what we're left with is a Zion that is empty and in ruins. You see, there's a gap between the promises of God and our present experience. And the book of Lamentations fills that gap with mourning and longing and groaning for the fulfillment of the promises of God. And that is the book of Lamentations' contribution to Zion theology. Zion theology, which is just a fancy term for the study of God's great promises for the city of Jerusalem. You see, the book of Lamentations is laser focused on the city of Zion. Look at this. 25 times in this book, Jerusalem, Zion, the daughter of Jerusalem, Mount Zion is going to be referenced. And the poet is going to highlight that Jerusalem was great, but is so no more. She who was great among the nations is the opening line of the book. And then in 2:15, is this the city that was called the perfection of beauty, the joy of all the earth? Isn't that amazing? Zion was called the perfection of beauty by all the nations, the joy of all the earth. And Lamentation says that was what Zion was like, its former state, but the prophets, in their expression of Zion theology, say that she will be great again. Look at this in Isaiah chapter 2. This is amazing. Let's study some Zion theology in the book of Isaiah. And it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be lifted up, and all of the nations will flow to Zion. For out of Zion will come the law and the word of the Lord, and there will be peace between all peoples. Because in Isaiah 33, Yahweh will fill Zion with justice, with righteousness, and he will be the stability of your times. Isaiah 33, Zion, Jerusalem will be an untroubled habitation, an immovable tent whose stakes will never be plucked up, nor will its cords be broken. Now, you remember how in chapter 1, there was no one found to comfort Lady Zion. And then the poet, in his prayer here in chapter 2, he's going to ask, how can I comfort you, Zion, you whom the Lord has punished? Well, this word comfort, or in the Hebrew, naham, is critically important for the prophet Isaiah. You probably know what passage I'm alluding to in Isaiah chapter 40. Look how he opens his restoration section of his book. He says, comfort, naham, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Her warfare is ended. Her iniquity is pardoned. That sounds like Lamentations chapter 4 to me. And notice how the comfort for Zion is linked to the coming of the Messiah. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. John the Baptist calling out, preparing Israel for Jesus. Let's look now at chapter 61. This is some great stuff. What did Jesus do when he went to his synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth? He opened up the scroll of Isaiah to chapter 61, and he read, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted. And look at this, end of verse 2, to comfort all who mourn. Who specifically? To grant to those who mourn in Zion, those who read and weep over the poems of Lamentations. To them they will be comforted, and they will be given a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, right? Weeping, dust, ashes, sackcloth. They will be given a beautiful headdress, gladness instead of mourning, praise instead of a faint spirit. And look at this, it's connected to the rebuilding of Jerusalem. They shall build the ancient ruins, raise up the former devastations, repair the ruined cities. Now let's go to the last chapter of Isaiah, 66. I will extend to her peace like a river. That sounds like a child's song to me. Peace like a river. And the glory of the nations, all of their wealth will go to Jerusalem like a flowing stream. I don't think that's in the children's song. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort Naham you, and you shall be comforted in Jerusalem. And what is the result of this comforting of Zion? Well, Lamentations, remember, it talks about Zion formerly being the perfection of beauty and the joy of all the earth. Well, that city will be the joy of all the earth again. Let's go back to Isaiah, this time chapter 60, my favorite chapter. The abundance of the sea will be turned to you. The wealth of all nations will come to you, O city of the Lord, Zion of the Holy One of Israel. Foreigners will build up your walls. And they will bring to you the wealth of the nations, whereas you were forsaken and hated, with no one passing through, empty, you will be majestic forever, a joy from age to age. Now let's go to chapter 62. The nations will see your righteousness, and the kings will see your glory, and you shall be called by a new name. You will not be called forsaken or desolate. No, you will be called, my delight is in her, and you will be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord. Remember what Lamentations chapter 2 said? You will be the perfection of beauty, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. Now let's get out of Isaiah and go to Jeremiah chapter 33. And this city will be to me a name of joy, a praise and a glory before all the nations of the earth. Formerly it was said that it was a waste without man or beast, empty. But it won't be so much longer. Let's go to the Psalms, Psalm 48. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, his holy mountain, beautiful in elevation. That sounds like Isaiah chapter 2 to me. It is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great King. Go, look how wonderful all of her buildings and structures are, newly minted and remade. Why is the city, will it become great? Because the great King has chosen that city. He's chosen it as his own. Look at the prophet Zechariah. He has some amazing things to say about Yahweh choosing Jerusalem. I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion, jealous of all of her former lovers that she ran after. I was angry for yet a little while, but now I have returned Jerusalem with mercy, and I will rebuild my house in that city. For the Lord will again Naham, the Lord will again comfort Zion, and again choose Jerusalem. I will choose you, O Zion, once more. For I will come and dwell in your midst, O daughter of Zion. I will dwell in your midst, and I will again choose Jerusalem. Oh, these passages are amazing. The question is, in reading a book like Lamentations, the question is, how do we maintain hope in the promises of God for Zion when the Zion that's before our eyes is just a pile of rubble? Well, that is what Lamentations chapter 3 subtly answers. Now, the poet is going to open up his central poem here with a curious, suffering individual. Lamentations 3 verse 1 says, I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of his wrath. This is Yahweh pouring out his wrath on this individual, the man who's under his wrath. It talks about how his flesh and his skin and his bones and his teeth and his kidneys are all under affliction. They're being afflicted. Now, some people have linked this curious suffering individual with the suffering servant from Isaiah, and they'll point to a few different textual links. Let's look at some of those. Go to the top. This is Lamentations chapter 3, and then Isaiah 53, where the suffering servant is found, along with Psalm 22, another location that describes the suffering of the Messiah. And you'll see there's many different links where it's underlined. That's where there's an exact Hebrew word parallel between both sections. And if this is true, if this connection is intended by the author, well, then what Lamentations is presenting is that Israel's suffering will be borne and carried by a specific individual on their behalf. So that's pretty amazing. Now, in all honesty, though there's a lot of connections here, I don't think that the connections are particularly strong. But what is certain about this chapter and the opening movement of this chapter in verses 1 to 20 is the suffering individual's conclusion. He will say that my soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So I say, my endurance has perished, and so has my hope from the Lord. My hope has perished. But his hope will be resurrected in the center of this poem, the center of chapter 3, which happens to be the center of the entire book of Lamentations, where it will say, let's read it together, lines worth memorizing. Though my endurance perish, and so did my hope from the Lord, this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies, they never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Why do we have the book of Lamentations? And how do we maintain hope in the promises of God for restoration when all that is before us is ruin and rubble? Well, these 5 beautifully crafted poems, they honestly acknowledge that Zion theology is not always easy to believe. But here at their very center, they point us to what is the source of our hope, the very character of God, which was revealed to Israel at Mount Sinai in Exodus 34. Our hope, you guys, our hope is as certain and as sure as the very character and nature of God himself. If he is a faithful God, great is your faithfulness. Then he will be faithful to us and to his promises, to his word for Jerusalem.